hero.
Oh, no, you didn't do that. No, that's not funny.
Oh, you have done much worse.
Yeah, like kill an insane amount of people. Nathan Drake is probably the most charismatic and charming mass murderer out there. He's a treasure hunter and a thief that has no issue with ending lives. He often goes head to head with rich, power-hungry psychopaths in pursuit of ancient treasures, prompting droves of mercenaries to come after him and ultimately resulting in a vast amount of death. Through sheer wit, determination, and a ridiculous amount of luck, Drake always comes out victorious in the end. But it's never really touched upon just how many people he murders in his travels. So I'm here to tally every single one of them up to determine exactly how many people he's killed.
Be careful.
Come on. I always am.
Ah! I did not see that!
First off, in order to properly calculate his kill count, we need to know exactly what is canon in the Uncharted universe. There's several games, a book, and comics that give us a glimpse into Nathan Drake's story. Thankfully, the movie is its own thing, so I can ignore its existence like I do normally. As for what counts as a kill, it's pretty straightforward in these games. However, during hand-to-hand combat, Nate will occasionally KO some enemies, but he also snaps their friggin' necks a lot of the time, which I'll obviously count as a kill. Now that the housekeeping is done, let's chart Nate's kills. The earliest glimpse we get into Nate's life is during some flashbacks in Uncharted 4. At age 5, his mother Cassandra passed away due to an illness. Nate and his brother Sam were surrendered to the state by their father, who also sold off all their mom's possessions. 8 years later, we see Nate being told he's a little shit by this nun, because he rightfully bashed some other kids for taking his book. When she leaves, he spots his brother Sam from the window and traverses the rooftops to meet Big Bro. Sam claims he has a surprise for his younger sibling and takes him outside the orphanage to show off his new motorcycle. Nate overheard some kids changing the definition of a slur to mean motorcycle riders though, and he's a little hesitant to get on it. But once Sam informs him he found out who their father sold their mother's belongings to, he's amped to ride over there with him. Through the magic of editing, we immediately cut to the estate, which appears to be vacant for now. So they sneak inside through an open window on the upper story and immediately start fishing through boxes. It's a massive house though, and it's filled to the brim with ancient artifacts. It takes them some time, but eventually they locate a box of their mother's things and start reading up on famous pirate Henry Avery's treasure. But they can barely get a page into it when the most ancient artifact of all pulls a gun on them. She informs the boys she called the cops and they'll sit tight until they arrive. But one comment about the notebook makes her realize that Cassandra Morgan was their mother, and that's all she needs to know to relax. She admired their mom, and tells the two about a little theory she had on Francis Drake's heirs, and that while history says he didn't have any, she thinks he did. The woman says she'll take care of the fuzz while they find their way out, but then she suddenly collapses before answering the door, and Sam realizes they'll be blamed for it and forces Nate to run. They're able to lead the cops on a chase around the property, with them ultimately escaping and taking a breather under a bridge. Knowing the cops will find them eventually, they agree to leave town, and in honor of their martyr, decide to change their last name from Morgan to Drake, while they begin their new life as treasure hunters. A couple years later, at 15 years old, Nate is in Colombia, planning to steal Francis Drake's ring while Sam is in prison somewhere else in the world. While trying to conceive of a way to open the display and take that thing, a middle-aged mustachioed man copies the lock. But before Nate can investigate further, one of the museum's security guards tosses the boy outside, where he tracks the man to a key copier. He follows him at a distance until he sees an opportunity to snatch his Walito from his ass pocket while he's distracted. He gets a block or two away when suddenly he's stopped by his target demanding his wallet back. And after some back and forth, he reluctantly hands it over, but we later see he was able to pocket the key. Later that day, once the museum closes, Nate sneaks inside and uses it to open the display, grabbing the ring and the decoder next to it. Instead of immediately leaving with the goods, he decides to stand there and use them, which proves a grave error when some more aged thieves enter the place. Queen Karen demands he hand them over, but he claims he doesn't have the ring. She fucking hates street rats though. And she even goes in for another. Not really wanting to get slapped again, Nate books it out of there, prompting a chase sequence that leads onto the rooftops where he very well may get his first kill when he accidentally sends this dude to the street. But I won't count it since he could technically survive this fall and we never actually see where he lands. Eventually, he's saved by Sully, who Nate formally meets afterwards and accepts his offer to go under his wing. The next we see Nate in his early 20s in a Panamanian prison fighting a child.
Hey, give me a call when you're tall enough to ride the rides.
The guards break it up and toss Nate into solitary confinement.
Where's the toilet?
You looking at it?
He's looking at your face, dude. A little sad Nate didn't take his offer to use his face as a toilet, the guard pulls him out of there and we discover they're actually working together. He's being paid by a partner of Nate's so they can sneak into an abandoned tower by the prison to examine the old cell of famed pirate Henry Avery. Nate climbs his way inside and finds an old cross, but nothing else. He lies to Vargas about finding nothing and that he needs to talk to his brother in the prison yard where their incredibly rich partner Rafe joins. Sam knows the cross is a clue to the St. Dismas Cathedral in Scotland, which gives them their next destination. But little did they know, they have a layover in Pound Town first.
What did he say?
The trio fights Nate's prison bully and his crew until the guards violently split them up. They find the cross stuffed up Nate's butt. Angry that Nate always be lying, Vargas demands a larger cut that they all agree to. But that's because Rafe learned the craft of prison shanking while inside and puts Vargas down. That leads into them running out and escaping the prison. But while trying to help his brother Sam up for the final stretch, he's shot by some guards and falls through the rusty roof below. After a lot of hesitation, Nate follows Rafe and gets out of Panama. And that's the last of the flashbacks from the games, with a 6-part comic taking place next. It starts with Nate and occasional colleague Harry Flynn under fire while on a job. Thinking quickly, Nate takes aim and fires a round right into the gas tank of a truck, blowing up 4 guys on the spot for the first kills on the count. They're able to escape with a journal, and this is where Harry exits the comic, but we're gonna see his smug fucking ass later. Sully confirms he has buyers lined up for the journal, but Nate wants to sift through it first, gathering notes on the Amber Room, former wonder of the world that was looted in 1944 during World War II, but was actually hidden by a man named Richard Byrd before the Germans could plunder it. Nate was hired by a brother-sister duo to retrieve the journal, and they plan to bid on an amber seal at an auction the following day that will lead them to the treasure. But unbeknownst to them, Nate and Sully are planning to steal that before they can place a bid. While scoping the place out, he meets Chloe Fraser for the first time. She also aims to steal the seal, but once they do, she nopes the fuck out of there because she can't stand the heat. Just when Nate thinks he's in the clear, his former employer pulls up with a kidnapped Sully and demands he gets in the car. They reveal themselves to be descendants of Thomas Doty, a man betrayed by Francis Drake. Their toxic generational hatred is frankly dumb as shit as they seek to restore their family name by finding the Amber Room and proving the Hollow Earth theory true. He forced Nate to decipher the Amber Seal, otherwise Sully is gonzo, so he provides close but incorrect coordinates. The dipshits believe them immediately, and Chloe comes in to rescue them. We cut to the trio heading to the North Pole knowing the weird siblings are nearby, but of course they get caught and are forced into guiding them into a cave system where they locate Bird's camp and a destroyed Amber Room. Michael gets pissed about this, but his sister Rose couldn't care less. Nate and Chloe do some main character shit by escaping and running free for a bit, but eventually their captors catch up to them just in time to bear witness to the smoking gods, who get to killing some of the nameless mercenaries. In the chaos, Nate and Chloe dip out and are the first to find the lost city of Agartha. But then a crazed Michael shoots at Nate and is perfectly adamant with dying as long as Nate does too. You know, to avenge his relative from over 400 years ago. While her brother is seething, Rose is drawn to glowing diamonds like a moth to a light, and like everyone else down here, Rose is also sick of Michael's lame lust for revenge and blasts her fool of a brother. Then she's like, oh, it's my turn, and plucks a diamond from the cluster, causing lava to leak out and turn her extra crispy. Nate and Chloe don't hang around, but the monsters pursue them relentlessly, netting Nate another 2 kills when he impales one and knocks another into the lava. After narrowly avoiding death, they link up with Sully back at the plane and fly out of there and back to the surface. Golden Abyss is the next entry in Nate's story that is exclusive to the PS Vita. Due to it being generally inaccessible, I'm borrowing footage from Longplay Archives, who have the full game available on their channel in one video. Nate is hired by colleague Jason Dante to examine a dig site in Panama and learns pretty quickly that some unsavory people may be involved as well when a local warlord, Roberto Guerrero, radios Dante. Soon after that, they run into a couple of Guerrero's soldiers for the first 2 kills of the game. They come up on a mass grave and Dante's mistrustful partner Marissa Chase, who tries to convince Nate to be her lone partner after Dante leaves to investigate some gunshots, claiming Dante will cut both of them out eventually.
Give me one good reason why I should.
I'll give you 2.
Really?
She shows Nate her amulet, but they're both attacked where Nate earns another 21 kills. Chase leads Nate through the jungle and runs into even more mercenaries. They wind up getting spotted by Dante, who is being held hostage by Guerrero. They're taken back to a compound that they traverse to locate Chase's amulet and find Dante, who they find out cut a deal with Guerrero to try and find the city of Quivira, one of the 7 cities of gold, supposedly located somewhere within Central America. As Nate and Chase work their way through the compound, they run into and kill plenty of Guerrero's men. And by they, I really mean Nate, because Chase refuses to use a gun despite their perilous situation. They eventually escape, and Chase informs Nate she wants to continue looking for the city in honor of her grandpappy, who started the research that Dante and Guerrero are utilizing to uncover the city. Nate realizes he made his way to Mexico, and they magically appear there. They pick up his trail after finding an ID card and some secret passage. They honor Granddaddy Chase with 11 deaths and eventually encounter his body. Chase wants to mourn next to it a bit and take in that sweet decomposing odor. So Nate does his favorite thing in the world, which is uncover history. Unfortunately, Dante's goblin-looking ass shows up and makes the mistake of insulting Guerrero with an earshot. Guerrero takes Chase with him, and Nate is forced into teaming up with Dante against his will to go after them, which nets Nate another 83 kills. They're too late though, and Guerrero escapes with Chase in tow. Still pissed at Dante for being a self-serving little weasel, Nate shoves a gun into Dante's face.
You go crying back to Sully.
I don't need Sully. Sully, I need you.
Nate knows that they're headed to the Serpent Jungle in search of the similarly named Serpent Temple, and takes a break from the murder while Sully gets his hand dirty instead. This part of the story goes quickly since there's a ton of action sequences leading up to the temple. That's in large part due to Guerrero's men and Dante's new mercenary army fighting each other, while Nate mops up any that he runs into for a large increase in kills. Sully decides to split off as they near the temple so he can secure a helicopter for their evacuation, but when Nate gets inside the temple, he realizes that's going to be pretty difficult to pull off with 2 different adversaries in the way. Nate starts blasting almost immediately, taking down any mercenary in his way as he casually gets his kill total closer to the 500 mark. He finally links up with Chase again and finds out her amulet is the key to unlocking the city of Quivira. Inside, they realize why this was called a city of gold. There's massive veins of gold stretching throughout the cavern. They don't get a lot of time to look around though because an explosion hints at enemies nearby. So they go to gather some treasure until a conveniently placed Geiger counter in Chase's pack uncovers the truth about the gold in here. It's all radioactive. Dante pops up like an unexpected shark, knowing damn well the gold is radioactive and relishes in the thought of selling it on the black market and poisoning people. Nate finds an opportunity to grab the bitch and shoots his bodyguard. Then they go fisticuffs for a bit until Nate knocks Dante to the ground. He whines about Nate going soft, despite just getting his ass beat, and Nate informs Dante he'll seal him in the cavern with explosives. He eliminates the rest of Dante's men on their way out, and maybe proving Dante a little bit right, cannot actually pull the trigger on sealing the door. But Chase can! 25 more lives are snuffed out with one guy dying from a cock shot. They rush their way out of there while bombs go off and start bringing the place down. But one final foe is looking to take them with him. Guerrero traps Chase under a whole-ass pillar after hitting it with a rocket launcher. So Nate does what Rickon could never do and zigzags his way to Guerrero and throws his ass onto a burning bridge that collapses under the warlord. Nate pulls Chase out from under the pillar and eventually hits a dead end, but Sully shows up in the nick of time to save the duo. Afterwards, Chase tells Nate she's DTF, but Sully kind of ruins the mood, hoping he can get a peek. And that's where the game ends. A motion comic written and directed by Neil Druckmann, who was working as a lead designer for the Uncharted series at the time, is next up. Nate doesn't actually get any kills during this particular adventure, and compared to what we typically see from him, this is a small-scale story. A psychopath named Daniel Pinkerton hires Nate to find an amulet called the Eye of Indra. He accepts the job, but actually intends to rob the dude, and admits this to a woman he meets later that night. He finds out the next morning that Rika is Eddie Raja's sister, giving Nate one thing to hang over his rival's head anytime he wants. They reluctantly work together to steal the amulet, which is right under Mr. Pinkerton's nose. By the end, Rika obliterates the villain and his men herself, robbing Nate of a kill, and then steals the amulet while leaving Nate and her own brother behind.
Don't say anything.
It cuts forward 3 days with Nate telling Sully everything and informing him he already has another job lined up and points to the TV screen. Before actually getting to the first game, however, there's a now non-existent Flash game that had a reporter hired by Elena Fisher to pursue Nate, who she believed was onto something big regarding Francis Drake. There aren't any kills in this either. It's a relatively uneventful game that has very little footage of it online. Picking up soon after the Eye of the Indra comic, Drake's fortune opens up with Nate and journalist Elena Fisher uncovering Sir Francis Drake's coffin off the coast of Panama. She openly questions his claim that he's an ancestor of the former explorer. He echoes his mother's beliefs as he opens the coffin to reveal it's empty outside of a journal, which he refuses to let Elena look at, saying their deal was only for the coffin. There's no time to argue, however, because some pirates are heading their way and he radios Sully for some backup. The game starts off fast, with Nate defending the boat and killing 7 pirates. Elena holds her own despite lacking experience, but the pirates have damaged the boat beyond repair, forcing an extraction by Sullivan. Nate excitedly tells Sully that Drake faked his own death while they head toward a small dock nearby. Sully has no patience for this shit though.
Man only interested in the climax. He must be a real hit with the ladies.
So Nate explains Drake was searching for El Dorado, and Sully tells Nate to get in the goddamn plane right quick so they can leave Elena in the dust. Following Drake's trail, they arrive in the Amazon rainforest, and while exploring some ruins, come to the conclusion that El Dorado is not a city of gold as the myth claims, but a large golden statue. That's one of my favorite things about the Uncharted games, how famous myths always seem to have a crumb of truth to them. Soon after, they enter a clearing that contains a German U-boat far from the ocean, but Sully wants to stay far away from it, so Nate has to go in alone. He finds dead bodies and old cans of soup all over the boat, and works his way to the back towards the captain's quarters. He notices the guy was ripped up by something, but more importantly, he locates coordinates pointing to some islands in the Pacific, so he goes to exit the boat and accidentally knocks an old torpedo down in the process. When he gets outside, he finds some unwanted guests hanging near Sully, and we're introduced to the main antagonist, Gabriel Roman, who Sully owes a lot of money. Sully claimed he was onto something big which piqued Roman's interest enough to tail them. Nate is forced into handing the map over, and as payment Roman is willing to give him a bullet, but instead shoots Sully. Within seconds after that, the torpedo sets off an explosion that incinerates the lone mercenary on the boat, which gives Nate a chance to run. Roman wasn't the only one to track them, however, with Elena joining the fray. 25 mercenaries are taken out by Nate as they search for the jeep Elena came in on. It cuts to them flying into the island, but Roman is already there, prepared with anti-aircraft weaponry to shoot them out of the sky. He rushes Elena into jumping out with a parachute, but waits until the last minute to do it himself. Unluckily for him, his chute has a hole. But luckily for him, the trees have better hands than Kadaria's Tony and catch Nate before he smashes into the ground to end this franchise early. He quickly realizes he forgot to grab his map and needs to find the plane's crash site. Most of this section is Nate traversing the jungle while taking down Roman's hired guns, with 58 dudes getting removed from this life. He climbs into the wreckage and pockets his map, then spots Elena's parachute hanging from a fortress down the way. But standing in his way are 33 mercenaries who meet their end courtesy of the treasure hunter. When he gets to the fortress, he gives his phalanges a workout by climbing the ruins, but Elena is just doing her thing and capturing footage for her documentary, while Nate is constantly fighting to stay alive. While he continues looking for Elena, he emerges onto a balcony and spots her, but he's not the only one. Before they can surprise her with an RPG to the face, he kills one, but isn't quick enough to get the other, who blows up the balcony and knocks Nate unconscious. He wakes up in a cell to find his old pal Eddie Raja heading the gang of mercenaries. He offers to let Nate live if he helps Eddie with finding El Dorado, but Nate politely declines as Elena busts him out. Nate climbs into the back of the vehicle and mans the turret, giving himself a very nice increase of 69 kills. But eventually, they get themselves cornered. Not seeing a way out of the situation, Nate goes the only way he can, backwards, right into the water below. Right away, 7 mercs are added to the count once they're on dry land, but they need to find a way out of here, and Nate finds one after Elena shows him some of the footage she captured. They come across a jet ski, and here's when Elena gets her opportunity to bump her own numbers up, but eventually Nate needs to parkour around some ruins and kills a few more guys to open the path forward. Elena and Nate bond over their shared love of murder, while they come across an old library containing various ship manifests, with one in particular proving Nate correct in that El Dorado was a massive 500-pound golden statue. It's here Elena asks about the ring on his neck, which he stole in Colombia and used it to find Drake's coffin. Elena elects to hang back to gather more footage while Nate continues onwards to snag that boat for a way off the island, but obviously he's got to do more killing. He gets to the boat while mercenaries load in some cargo, and just when he's ready to commit more vicious acts of violence, Elena apparates by his side to show him something interesting. Sully is still alive and looking a little sus, but Nate can't believe it and the boat departs without them. While looking for another way off the island, a rickety bridge falls apart under Elena, causing her to drop her camera and lose all of her footage for the documentary. She takes her frustration out on these meat bags lining the river. Afterwards, while in the jungle, they encounter a man impaled in a trap that utilized metal from the plane they flew in on. Some strange footprints line the paths near them, but Sully is their biggest concern right now. Nate takes out 38 more mercs within the jungle and while saving Sully from his captors, and right when he's mid-story.
Wee bit of a thing. She couldn't have been much more than 4'11". They called her the spinner because she...
Will you shut up, old man?
Sully claims his innocence and said he's been leading Roman astray and sent them to a building he knows is a dead end. With the enemies cleared out, Nate finds a secret passage and has his counterpart stay behind while he explores the underground. Of course, there's more kills to be had down here, and while doing so, Nate finds himself right below Roman and Eddie Raja while they discuss business. Eddie's men are dying off, and not just by Nate's hand. He claims the island is cursed and gets fired for his superstitious beliefs. Roman's right-hand man Navarro reassures his boss that El Dorado is located within a vault close by. Nate hears from Sully over the radio, saying they found evidence of a secret gallery at the top of a church, so Nate finds an opportunity to bump his kill count up again. He works his way into the secret room and follows the Spanish insignias, only to discover that the building Sully sent Roman to on a wild goose chase is in fact the one he needs to search. One diversion later, they meet up inside the mausoleum where Elena accidentally activates a trap that separates Sully from the group. This sets Nate and Elena down an underground path that puts them into a large, elaborate chamber with strange things moving in the shadows. Their immediate concern is Eddie's arrival though. Well, maybe they should be more concerned about Nate's presence because they get fucking wrecked. They catch a breather in an empty chamber where Nate discovers Sir Francis Drake's corpse. He's really disappointed he seemingly never found El Dorado and leaves the ring with him. Nate hoists Elena up a level to look for a way out, but following that is a frightened Eddie and one remaining mercenary. They don't even notice Nate right away, and that's because something scarier than him is down here. The game takes a sharp right turn into something horror adjacent as these pale monsters take Eddie's man and set their sights on the remaining two.
If we don't make it out of here, I just want you to know, I hate your guts.
Nate and Eddie team up temporarily to fight off the incoming creatures, but eventually they're able to get the upper hand and take Eddie out, despite Nate doing what he can to save him. Elena is able to throw a rope down, and they fucking book it out of there while Nate tacks on 3 more kills. And their rush to get as far away from those creatures as possible, they wind up in an old German bunker, but there's no way out unless you're a parkour expert like Nate. This means he gets to wander around the dark, creepy tunnels by himself. Not exactly by himself though, since those beasts are down here with him, so graciously pushing his kill count over 1,000. He discovers that Francis Drake did in fact find El Dorado, and the curse it inflicts upon people, so he worked to ensure no one could get off the island and take the statue with them. Afterwards, he runs into Roman, who is taking Elena hostage to keep Nate in check, but he's a fucking fool to think that will actually help. Nate quickly goes after him, eliminating any human or monster in his path, then gets an additional increase of 30 once he gets to the surface and helps Sully. He fills Sullivan in on the lore of the island as they track Roman, but the man was prepared and has his mercs to disarm them. They sit idly by while Navarro tells Roman to open the damn thing, finding out it contains a body within that emits magic dust that gets you so high you lose yourself. Navarro domes his former boss and plans to sell the treasure to the highest bidder, but Nate won't let that happen and shoves the merc nearby, who we know dies because the monsters lie in wait in the water. Sully covers Nate as the monsters flood into the room and he gains another 6 kills running up the stairs. He jumps onto the loot as the chopper takes off, but he's definitely getting noticed. Elena sees an opportunity to cause some havoc though and boots the fucking dude out the chopper, who brains the pilot on his way out. It descends towards the ship and Nate drops off before it can crash. It stops just short of the water, and Navarro emerges like a ganado. Nate kills off the 13 remaining mercenaries on the boat and takes on Navarro directly. Once he's KO'd, he rushes to the chopper and pulls Elena out, but Navarro is looking to end things when he gets up. So Nate pushes a whole fucking helicopter off the ship by himself, which wraps a rope around Navarro's leg and sends him to the bottom of the ocean for the final kill in the game. Elena took the ring, assuming Nate would regret leaving it behind and gives it back. But the best news of all is Sully secured some treasure, making this whole adventure worthwhile. 2 years after the events of Drake's fortune, Nate has become ass-obsessed.
You got a great ass, Sully.
Well, it is an ass worth saving.
Nice view.
He's approached by Harry Flynn and Chloe Frazier for a job, but Harry doesn't know that Nate and Chloe have history. Harry's client wants a seemingly worthless oil lamp being held within the highly guarded Istanbul Palace Museum. Nate doesn't wanna, but the mystery of Marco Polo's lost fleet is too tempting for Nate and he accepts. It cuts to them in Istanbul, breaking their way into the sewer, so in case they get caught, the hope is the sewage stench will ward off any security. Chloe splits off so she can prepare to shut down some lights for Nate and Harry, who traverse the grounds and utilize non-lethal methods to take down guards. There was this one weird moment though, where I definitely thought this guy died when Nate pulled him off the side of the building, but then you see him swimming below. Chloe does her part, which allows Nate and Harry to get inside unnoticed, where Nate clearly didn't learn his lesson in Colombia and couldn't wait to shatter the lamp. He finds resin inside, which illuminates the text on the paper within, pointing towards Borneo and the fact that Marco Polo found Shambhala, otherwise known as Shangri-La. Harry's like, thanks mate, and leaves him there to be their fall guy. Nate spends a few months in prison before Sully gets him out, but Chloe's presence is not appreciated. She swears she wasn't in on it and informs Nate that Harry hasn't been able to make any progress in Borneo. His client Zoran Lazarevic has spent copious amounts of cash to compile any known artifact Marco Polo has so much as farted on. So Nate tells Chloe she'll need to use her status within the group to cause a diversion that will allow Nate inside the camp to review Lazarevic's files and find Shambhala and the priceless Chintamani stone before them. They get to Borneo and start arming bombs around the camp, so once they're set off, it will vacate Lazarevic's tent, but somehow the firefights that grant Nate 24 kills don't accomplish that. After the bombs are armed and Nate and Sully are close enough, they watch as Lazarevic shows off his brutality after finding a man taking small artifacts from a dig site. The explosions pull most of the men away from the camp, but 3 remain behind as a small guard, which isn't nearly enough to pose a challenge to Nate. Nate quickly examines the files to discover Marco Polo never found the stone, but finds it odd that they never saw any dead bodies around the shipwrecks here, so he wants to get to higher ground to see if there's evidence of them anywhere. But he took a bit too long in the tent and has to contend with 28 mercenaries before he can leave. They climb up a ways and eventually encounter some ruins that clearly housed Polo's ruined men, who appear to have killed each other and have one last surprise for any wanderers. The box contains a dagger that looks to be of Tibetan origin, complete with a map that points them towards Nepal. Chloe scouts ahead, and as they get to the entrance of the ruins, she leads Harry right to them. But it's all a ruse, as she later dispatches the men leading them away so Nate and Sully can escape. We skip forward to Nepal, which is suffering from a civil war spurred on by Lazarevic, who uses the fighting as cover to blow the city apart in search of clues leading to Shambhala. The dagger from Borneo has symbols that match some of the buildings around them, so Nate needs to explore the city to find the correct temple. But due to Lazarevic's presence, they run into a lot of resistance in the area that provides a large increase in kills for Nate as he battles over 100 men. In the midst of the chaos, they run into Elena, who is there tracking Lazarevic, who the world believes to be dead, and she's aiming to prove them wrong. They move through the city as a group, but at Chloe's request, who may be feeling a little jealous of Elena's history with Nate, wants them to stay inside the entrance of the temple while her and Nate explore the interior. They locate an underground passage that leads into a large chamber containing an elaborate puzzle that points them to Shambhala's exact location. They hear some unfriendly voices enter the chamber above, and since that's their only way out, that means blood has to be spilled. They find Elena and her cameraman Jeff outside, who has been shot. Chloe wants to leave him since he'll slow them down, but if you don't think about how Nate has killed over 1,300 people so far, he's a pretty good guy and helps Jeff up. He gains another 9 kills while carrying Jeff through the streets, but Chloe was right in that he'd slow them down, which allows Flynn and Lazarevic to catch up. The most villainy looking villain ever shoots Jeff in front of them and takes the map marking Shambhala's location out of Nate's pocket. It was probably just to touch his ass. He orders Flynn to kill them, but Elena says no bitch and they make a run for it. Nate wants to go after Chloe now that she's been ousted as a turncoat. He overheard Harry talking about a trading yard, so they head that direction and Nate gets a quick increase in 24 kills. Elena pulls up in a jeep as more men swarm the place, giving Nate a way out as she drives to the departing train so he can jump aboard. While on the train, Nate slowly works his way up from the back, murdering a bunch of Lazarevic's men in the process. He takes out a helicopter that shortens the train up a bit. Closer to the front of the train, this dude with main character syndrome puts up quite a fight, but he gets KO'd by Nate so he can take the dagger back. Bro wakes up and gets the upper hand though, until his brain exits his head courtesy of Chloe. Her and Nate have a bit of a spat that's interrupted by rude-ass Flynn when he shoots him in the gut. Realizing his dickle is in a pickle, Nate runs and hides. He notices a couple propane tanks and makes Hank Hill proud when he uses those to blow up a couple guys and sends the train careening off the mountain, causing a massive accident that puts Nate into a perilous climbing situation. After narrowly getting free of the train before it tumbles off the cliff, Nate finds the dagger in the snow and has to kill 19 more mercenaries stranded after the crash. He passes out in the soft, pillowy snow and wakes up in a Tibetan village with a familiar face. Elena introduces Nate to Carl Schaefer, an old German guy who led an expedition to this same area 70 years ago. According to him, that dagger is the key to Shambhala, meaning Lazarevich is shit out of luck without it. He challenges Nate to find the remains of his scouting party to find proof of the Chintamani stone. He sets out with a guy named Tenzin and they explore the icy caverns together, following clues and getting attacked by a demon yeti. What the fuck? After taking a few dozen rounds to the face, it runs off and lets them continue exploring in peace until they finally locate the chamber containing human remains. Nate examines the evidence, realizing Carl was a Nazi and that he killed his own men because the stone turns people into monsters, like the ones coming to attack them right now. They take a lift up, but a demon yeti is weighing that bitch down and becomes the first non-mercenary kill of the game. When they exit the caves, they spot the village on fire in the distance and race back there. Carl took Tenzin's daughter to try and protect her from the attack, so Nate and Tenzin continue their partnership to fight through the village, increasing Nate's count by a massive 118 bodies. Once they're cleared out, Tenzin gets his kid back, but Carl was kidnapped since he had the dagger. Feeling that lust for violence again, Elena joins Nate and assists in chasing down Lazarevich's convoy. In a short amount of time, Nate murders several mercenaries as he jumps truck to truck and utilizes a turret to obliterate a lot of them. He jumps back to Elena's, but an RPG cuts that short and nearly kills them both. They follow the small army into a monastery so they can get Carl and that dagger back, which results in yet another hefty increase in kills. They took the dagger, but Nate has time to take it back and uncover the secret passage to Shambhala, noting that the demon yetis are now out and about. During his search, he gets some satisfaction watching Lazarevich berate Harry Flynn for being an incompetent fool. They leave Chloe behind to search for clues, but Nate is pissed at her and demands the dagger back before he does something rash. He follows clues to a landing that should contain some more hints on how to find Shambhala, but the problem is more mercenaries are occupying the area. Actually, is that really a problem? Nah, because it gives Nate another 20 kills. Nate uses the dagger to reveal the hidden path that requires them to backtrack as the Yetis continue to decimate the mercenaries, but not as badly as Nate is. However, Lazarevich catches up and threatens to harm Chloe and Elena unless Nate cooperates. He traverses the next area with Flynn and they wind up being attacked by the demon Yetis. And Nate doesn't get a single death because Lazarevich is a little kill-stealing asshole. He pulls the mask off to reveal the Yetis are actually humans, just highly resistant to gunfire humans. Before Lazarevich finishes Nate off, he wishes that Nate see Shambhala first, knowing he lost and Lazarevich won. But that proves to be a mistake because shortly after stepping foot inside, the Guardians attack, giving Nate, Elena, and Chloe a chance to run. The next section has the trio of explorers traversing the ruins of Shambhala while taking on dozens of enemies between the mercenaries and the Guardians. After some time, they find a room that turns Nate's beliefs on the Chintamani stone upside down. There isn't an actual stone, but it's sap from the Tree of Life that, when consumed, makes the user nearly invincible. They went in the wrong direction, which allowed Lazarevich the chance to get there unimpeded. But then Flynn shows up, looking like a haggard piece of shit.
Disappointed Lazarevich beat you to it?
Bro, that's what I just said. God, shut up! Oh shit! Flynn's sudden attack injures Elena severely to the point that Chloe is willing to help, which requires Nate to provide cover fire for another 14 kills. Nate demands Chloe get Elena out of there while he runs down to stop Lazarevich from consuming the sap, but he inexplicably watches him do it. Just shoot him, Nate! Oh, you dumbass. You dumbass, it's too late now. He winds up shooting the sap, which eliminates the normie standing next to it so that Nate can focus on whittling down Lazarevich's newfound strength by repeatedly igniting the sap. After doing that enough times, he injures Lazarevich and leaves him to be mauled by Guardians. Nate igniting all that sap also made the entire city unstable, which requires him to hurry the fuck up and get out. He links up with the girls right as a Guardian jumps Chloe, which Nate helps get off.
What did he say?
But we confirm it doesn't die by his hand since Chloe kicks it off and it attempts to hold on afterwards. The city crumbles, meaning the Guardians very well may die off here, but considering how incredibly resilient they are, I'm not entirely convinced Nate got them all killed here. So I'll leave them off the count as Nate panics over Elena's condition. She's brought back to the village to receive treatment, and it's there Chloe realizes Nate can never be hers.
You're gonna miss this ass.
Sully goes after her though, looking to become Eskimo brothers with Nate, while he hangs back to talk to Elena as the game ends there. Nestled right between these second and third games sits the only novel in the franchise. Written by Christopher Golden, this is a more standalone story, so it doesn't risk any continuity errors with the games. Outside of Nate and Sully, no other characters make an appearance elsewhere in the canon, and it's a solid story that fits right in with the Uncharted universe. Sully's good friend Luca is brutally murdered, and they set out with his daughter Jada to find out who did it. They travel to several continents, exploring Egypt, Greece, and China, while following clues left behind from Luca's research on ancient labyrinths. During their search, they face two different adversaries: Luca's wife and Jada's stepmom Olivia, her colleague Tyr Henriksen, and their mercenaries, and then a group known as the Protectors of the Hidden Word that sends hyper-stealthy masked individuals after them and the mercenaries. Nate only gets 4 kills during the course of the story, with one nameless mercenary, 2 protectors, and a named mercenary who he tosses into a ravine near the end. This adventure is rough on pretty much everyone, with Sully getting brainwashed and trying to kill Nate, and both adversary groups dying by each other's hands. Shit, some ancient minotaurs are thrown into the mix, who were once humans turned into grotesque beasts. They make off without a single ounce of treasure, but Jada gets some peace of mind knowing the protectors and her dad's murderers are gone. It ends with Sully offering Nate a job and hinting at another possible novel, but as of yet, nothing has been announced. We pick up again with Nate and Sully in London as they're dressed to the nines for this Jason Statham lookalike contest. They're taken to the back of the bar where a man is forking over a lot of cash for Francis Drake's ring. Both parties authenticate their goods, but the cash is counterfeit and they call the deal off. 14 Jason Stathams go up against Nate and Sully though, ultimately losing into the alleyway until they finally overcome. A car pulls into the alley to reveal that child-hating Karen from Colombia, whose real name is actually Catherine, has never stopped trying to get that ring.
Same cock shit.
Statham number 1 gets sick of waiting around and pops both Nate and Sully, making Catherine and her man puppet Talbot bounce before anyone investigates the gunshots. But as soon as they're out of sight, we learn it was all a ruse to lure those two out of the woodwork so they can follow them. They link up with Chloe, who witnessed them enter a garage down the street. Nate finds a way inside and lets the others in, but the villains pulled some Scooby-Doo shit and disappeared. After some searching, they find a secret door and follow it underground, eventually running into some guys for the first 4 kills of the game. As they continue onwards, they locate their car and go non-lethal, knocking out guys to not cause a disturbance. They come up on a room containing a good amount of ancient artifacts, but Nate is looking for one thing in particular from Francis Drake's ship, which he finds hanging up high. But as he climbs up, some foes enter the room and this begins a long shootout as Nate, Sully, and Cutter all fight their way out of the villain's underground lair. They finally emerge onto the street and Chloe provides support as they pile into the van and Nate adds on an additional kill while they leave. After they're done being shot at, Nate informs the group that Drake was sent on a mission by Queen Elizabeth to locate the Atlantis of the Sands, and that much later Lawrence of Arabia was also trying to find it. Drake had half the clues and Lawrence had the other half, so they should be able to find it before Catherine and her group does. They just need to split up to save some time, with Chloe and Cutter going to Syria and Nate and Sully going to... Nate and Sully get this large abandoned chateau all to themselves, for a while anyway. Talbot's men now litter the grounds, and Nate makes it their final resting place for 35 individuals. As the two of them follow clues to a crypt, they encounter one of Talbot's men that appears to have crawled his way off a beach that made a mold, and they head underground. There's a half of an amulet that points towards Yemen, but without the other half, they won't know exactly where. Upon their exit, Talbot demands they hand the amulet over and leaves them behind as a swarm of spiders crawl in and promptly remove one of Talbot's men from existence. With their torch going out, both Nate and Sully sprint out of there as fast as they can and immediately find themselves in danger as Talbot's men pour gasoline around the place and set fire to it. They fight their way through the burning building, mostly shooting their way through, but this big SOB is being counted as a kill because even though he was KO'd, he was surrounded by fire and had to have been consumed by it. They get clear of the fire and Sully admits to Nate that this journey they're on feels different and that maybe he should consider backing out and letting these people go. But he refuses and wants to get to Syria now. Oh wow, that was fast. They begin their search in an old Syrian fortress, running into 53 of Talbot's meat suits in the process. They find Chloe and Cutter who conveniently can't use their phones, but good news is they discovered Drake was part of a secret society run by the Queen that is still present today in the form of Catherine's group. Cutter found some clues that will lead them to the other amulet.
As above, so below.
Hey, I've seen that movie. Wait, we were just in France. Cutter winds up getting hit with a poison dart that makes him Talbot's puppet temporarily as he hands over his gun and journal to the weird creep. He tells Cutter not to trust Nate before he slinks off, and they enter a hidden passage together that triggers Cutter's memory that he should not trust Nate. So he better strangle that bitch. Chloe is able to calm the Brit down so the four can work together to nab the other amulet. They're given the exact location in Yemen, but they can hear Talbot's guys nearby and they fucking bust through this wall and kill a man. After that, they find themselves in a standoff against Talbot, and that's where Cutter turns his gun on Nate. But psych, he was just kidding, dog! He uses that as a way to blast Talbot so they can make their escape. But Cutter finds himself trapped after the path forward collapses, and Psycho Karen ignites a fire to block him off. Wait, how's that dude alive? Seeing no way forward, Cutter jumps down and breaks his leg, making Nate the primary shooter as they kill Talbot's goons and push Nate's total count over 2,000. They eventually reach the entrance to the fort as tourists begin showing up, so they hijack their bus, and down the road a ways, Chloe echoes the words of Sullivan back in France. However, Cutter still encourages Nate to continue, saying he can't let Catherine win. Sullivan suggests they call an old friend in Yemen, which Nate isn't too thrilled about. Him and Elena got married after the second game, but separated due to unknown reasons. He knows that she's still wearing her ring though.
It helps in this part of the world.
Oh, really?
Seriously? Don't flatter yourself.
She drives them into town, warning the other two troublemakers to be on their best behavior. She escorts them around the city, but police are barricading their path, making them find creative solutions that leads to Nate spotting Talbot. He follows him and pickpockets the notebook he took from Cutter, then fights off 12 of his guys before he rejoins his friends. They climb down into a cistern that is hiding an underground tunnel that reveals a celestial map that Sully can read from his time in the Navy. Elena notes some unsettling artwork on the wall. As if to make it even worse, a ton of spiders come crawling out. This is the one and only time Nate is forced into killing any kind of animal. And since y'all fucking hate when I count them, I'll leave them off the official count. However, I couldn't help myself and tried doing it anyway. It's impossible to determine exactly how many, but it looks to be roughly 10 to 15 spiders per shot, which would put that number between 200 to 250 spiders killed here. They narrowly survive that encounter and find a note from Francis Drake as a warning, which Elena suggests Nate heeds. On their way back, Nate tacks on another 3 kills before they exit back onto the street where Nate gets the Cutter treatment. He trips balls through the streets for entirely too long until he comes to at a table with Catherine, Talbot, and this rando. Catherine attempts to convince Nate that Sully only cares about himself, forgetting that they have been partners for most of Nate's life, so obviously that dumb shit doesn't work. Talbot's men wind up finding Sully across town though, so when he gets up, Nate pursues him, but eventually gets KO'd. He wakes up to Ramses, a pirate that is more like the person Catherine described Sully as. He was paid to kill Nate, but wants him to lead the pirate to Sandy Atlantis. Nate isn't entirely sure where it's at and tells Ramses the truth, but he doesn't believe him and says he's gonna go ask Sully instead. This begins an absolutely ridiculous gauntlet of 123 kills that takes place in an ugly ship graveyard and on a cruise ship Ramses uses as a base. But Nate's dumbass fell for Ramses' lies and finds that he never had Sully captive. He sends a lone guy down thinking that's enough to contain a man that just killed over 100 of his own people, so he learns real quick that was a mistake and gets shot for it, but he only gets injured. Through his actions, Nate blasts a hole in the side of the ship, starting a sinking process that puts some urgency on the situation. Either by his own hand, or due to water causing them to drown, Nate puts on another 12 kills until Ramses tries to take him down to the ship. He's able to outrun the rushing water and jumps off the ship using a small piece of wood as a flotation device until he comes ashore. He's able to find Elena, who regretfully informs Nate that Sully was taken by Catherine. He's ready to seek them out, but she already has a plan and tells Nate to get some sleep first. They arrive at the airport so they can sneak onto their cargo plane and parachute down to their base camp in the desert to rescue Sully. But 30 NPCs stand between Nate and that plane, which need murdering. Elena pulls a familiar maneuver, grabbing Nate in a jeep and offloading him onto a moving vehicle, where he hides until it's about time to start causing havoc. This absolute unit has a flair for the dramatic and aims to toss Nate out of the plane, which backfires on him to start the kill counter again, with 6 more following the big guy. The plane winds up going down, and I'm not really 100% sure why, so I'm not going to attribute that to Nate. He catches himself on some cargo and yanks the chute, so he can land safely in the middle of the desert. He wanders it on his own for a while until he spots an abandoned town. It's not long until he encounters enemies though, but despite being starving and dehydrated, Nate always has the energy to kill. He gains an ally in Salim, whose tribe acts as guardians to the lost city and wants to help Nate in his venture, where they use a set of super fast horses to keep up with his convoy, and Nate gets another 26 kills. He rescues Sully just in time to get lost in a sandstorm and splits up from Salim. So it's up to the duo to find their way to the city and take on the mercenaries blocking their path. They enter the city and immediately Nate takes a swig from the fountain to quench his thirst. He notices a peculiar eclipse right before Sully is shot by Talbot. Nate goes after him, but runs into some resistance along the way, with some men turning into Jim and are by far the most annoying enemies in the franchise. He runs into Sully, who appears to be unharmed, and Nate demands to know how he's real.
Ow!
He tells Nate he went nuts right after he drank from the fountain and ran off. Upon that revelation, Nate concludes Drake erased records of his journey here due to the hallucinogenic properties that would have given Queen Elizabeth far too much power. Sully snatches up a strong gun as they seek the secret order to stop them from using the LSD on steroids. Smug-ass Talbot ruins their stealth plans though, putting both guys in the water where Nate sees the massive jar possibly containing a djinn, so he uses Sully's shiny new weapon to destroy their crane and ruin their plans. The weapon is maybe a bit stronger than expected though, as it triggers a chain reaction that has the entire fucking city falling apart. As they run, they take down even more of Talbot's guys. Nate, Talbot, and Catherine land in some quicksand, but Nate and Talbot are close to solid ground and pull themselves free. However, Catherine is not and pleads for Nate's help, which he provides after some hesitation. She's unable to get a solid grip though and sinks into the sand, which makes Talbot real sad. They waste no time leaving, but Talbot is big mad and wants vengeance. He doesn't get it though and is defeated by Nathan, who is picked up along with Sully by Salim. They watch the city disappear into the sand, and it cuts to the airport with Sully getting a little mushy.
You're not proposing, are you, Sully? I mean, I love you, but...
Stop. Just stop being a wise ass for 1 second.
He encourages Nate to rekindle what he has with Elena, who is more than willing to oblige. 3 years after the previous game, Nate can be seen diving at the bottom of a body of water to secure some cargo from this beautiful tropical location of New Orleans. His boss asks Nate to accompany him to a high-paying illegal job off the coast of Malaysia, but he's done with that sort of life and declines so he can go back home to his wife. Elena begins telling him about an article she's writing, and like a true husband, he tunes her out as he focuses on the thought of adventure. She encourages him to take the Malaysia job to satisfy that itch, but the only adventure he'll get is in video game format.
Crash Bandicoot.
Gosh, that feels all too real. The next day at work, he's in the middle of some paperwork when his brother Sam suddenly shows up. Nate just about shits his dick realizing his big bro is still alive, and they spend hours catching up. Sam regrettably is in a lot of trouble with a drug lord named Hector Alcazar that is expecting him to uncover Henry Avery's treasure. He tells Nate how he was broken out of prison by the Kingpin's men and needs to recover the treasure within 6 months to save his life. Nate explains to his brother that he and Rafe combed over the land around the St. Dismas Cathedral after their venture in Panama 15 years prior and came up empty, but Sam has been made aware of a duplicate cross matching the one they found that will be up for auction in Italy in just 3 days' time. Nate claims he's done with that sort of life, but nothing beats a good old-fashioned family guilt trip. He calls Elena to break the news that he's taking the Malaysia job after all. Cut to Italy, and the two brothers sneak into the auction house with Sully's help. Unfortunately for them, the cross is going up sooner than expected, causing a change in plans that will have Sam pose as a waiter and snatch the cross while Nate shuts the power off. While they set out to do their part, Sully is chatted up by Nadine Ross, owner of a mercenary group and new partner of Rafe. Sam KOs an unsuspecting waiter and takes his outfit while Nate sneaks to the main electrical panel and shuts the power off. Rafe gets aggro when he realizes the cross has been taken, and both Sully and Sam take the few seconds of darkness to get out. While looking for his own way out of there, Nate runs into Nadine, who he's about to get to know better real soon. She beats his ass looking for the cross and puts an exclamation point on the whole ordeal by throwing him out of a window. This gives Nate a chance to gain his first kill in years as he gets his hands real bloody by adding 32. Sully picks them up, and when they're safe, find a letter from Avery inside the cross with a code that will send them to the St. Dismas Cathedral in Scotland.
I do hear that the weather is particularly fine in Scotland this time of year.
Said no one ever. We skip to them arriving in Scotland as they overhear Nadine's army using TNT to dig for secrets. Sully's gonna wade off the coast in a plane while Nate and Sam casually murder Nadine's soldiers. Their search leads them to Avery's grave, which in turn points them to a hidden cave under the cathedral itself. The brothers Drake explore the cave system at their leisure and overhear a disagreement between Rafe and Nadine and their methods. Nadine's men are over here blowing shit up all willy-nilly and destroying artifacts Rafe can examine. All the while, Nadine believes Rafe wanted to draw Nathan out because he needs his expertise to find Avery's treasure. Just hearing that gives Nate a boner, but moving forward, they enter a chamber designed to test one's greed. They plug just a single coin from the scale to perfectly balance it out, and reveals a map of Madagascar, and more specifically King's Bay. Nate gets so excited he uses his outside voice, and Nadine can hear them on the other side of the wall and blows it wide open. Sam suggests they grab that big fancy cross over there, as he and Nate slowly back up, but Nadine notices too late and her man triggers the trap. In the chaos, Nate is able to gain an additional 47 kills while he and Sam get out of Scotland. There's too many guys to contend with, so the brothers slide into the ocean and swim to Sully's plane, where he informs him they're flying to Madagascar, and will begin their search by a volcano minted on one side of the coin. Nate gives Elena a little ring and claims things in Malaysia have gone cattywampus, so it'll be a tad bit longer. Fast forward to them losing their signal on the road.
You know what never loses signal? Paper.
And I thought Sully was the boomer here. Nate drives around the muddy terrain to explore towers that have sigils matching various pirate captains that were potentially recruited by Avery. It would take far too long to go to each tower, and luckily there's a hidden map that marks each one, but examining the coin shows it can be one of two sigils. This entire open area is actually less populated with enemies than you'd think, with an increase of 35 pushing Nate's total up. They elect to split up, with Nate and Sully taking one tower and Sam heading towards another. Almost immediately, Nate confirms they're at the right tower, but Sam isn't answering his phone until they're in the basement working out a puzzle. Afterwards, Nate's balls tingle with excitement when he realizes they are on the trail of the mythic pirate Utopia Libertalia. But Rafe ruins Nate's gooning sesh when he calls Sully's phone to admit he hacked into them and now has the same details, and their location via GPS. They rush outside and see Sam is already under attack, and they soon follow. Nate gets his chance to tack on a fair amount of kills here while he races across the city to get his brother. When they get back to the hotel, Nate and Sam are buzzing with the possibility of uncovering Libertalia. However, a blonde surprise waits for him in their hotel. Elena is beyond upset to find Nate has been lying to her this whole time, and in the midst of that is introduced to Sam. She leaves, and Nate doesn't follow, earning Sully's judgment, who goes to look after her instead. Nate and Sam begin their search in a chain of islands to the northeast, and after uncovering a large statue of Henry Avery, they're pointed to the exact location. They aren't the only ones though. Rafe and Nadine and her people show up on boats, and they race toward the island in the middle of a storm, giving Nate yet another 31 kills. His killing spree is ruined when a large boat rams into theirs and sends the brothers into the water. Nate comes ashore by himself and sets out to find Sam, but winds up taking a little nap instead. It looks pretty nice. With impeccable timing, Nate wakes up to see Sam using SOS, so he heads that way and finds evidence of pirates along the way. He puts down 22 of Nadine's men until he finally runs into Sam. By this point, Nate is fed up and suggests they go steal Rafe's boat and be done with the whole thing. Sam ain't about to give up though, and just as Nate is about to respond, he finds Avery's sigil in the trees. They follow the decrepit buildings until they find the entrance to Libertalia. The city is heavily run down, and there are signs of discontent among the colonists, who look to have fought the pirate leaders outside of the treasury building. It appears the founders of Libertalia may have stolen from the colonists, which tracks for a bunch of pirates, and they store the treasure in New Devon, a neighborhood that housed the pirate elites. We know by now they didn't explore this alone though. There are always kills to count. As they set out towards New Devon, Nadine arrives to fuck things up. After a brief and brutal scuffle, Sam picks up a gun and stops the fight there, but Rafe and Nadine's guys pop in to say hi. Sam threatens to shoot Nadine, and Rafe fucking encourages him to do so. Realizing Sam will actually do it, Nate snatches the gun out of his hands and forces both of them to surrender. He promises Rafe he'll help him locate the treasure, but they just need a cut to pay off Hector Alcazar, which makes Rafe laugh. Turns out, Sam's freedom was bought by Rafe after he found out he was still alive. He needed help, and Sam tracked down that second cross, then decided to abandon Rafe and join up with Nate to find the treasure as brothers. To add to Nate's pain, Rafe decides to shoot him, but Sam jumps in the way and sends Nate tumbling off the platform below, where he gets knocked unconscious. But his bamf of a wife is there to make sure he's okie dokie. After filling Elena in on the lore of his childhood, the couple team up to fight their way into New Devon to save Sam. The treasure is a non-issue now, so in between killing Nadine's mercenaries, they talk things through to slowly make up.
You're supposed to come to me.
To kill people! They know they find the right spot when they locate a bunch of cages containing skeletons labeled as traitors. They confirm Sam is still with Rafe as they enter Avery's mansion, and they beeline it there, gaining 39 more kills in doing so. Inside the dining dining room, they can suss out exactly what happened between the founders, with all of them except for Henry Avery and his right-hand man Thomas Tew being poisoned at the dinner table. In another room, a letter indicates Tew and Avery were also at odds, so Avery moved his treasure to his ship for safekeeping. They follow the footsteps and kill another 18 men inside the booby-trapped tunnels. They get caught up in another of Avery's traps and hurriedly swing for a sword to cut themselves down, then narrowly escape the series of explosions to find themselves in a bay littered with destroyed galleons. They spot Sam making a run for it and hurry to join him, but a lot of fighting lies ahead, with Nate's kill count breaching 2,800. Sully joins the fray to assist in saving Nate's ass, but Sam is a stubborn little bitch and still wants to find the treasure. Even though he doesn't want to, Nate goes after his brother and overhears Nadine trying to tell Rafe she's leaving with a couple $1 million in treasure, because most of her men are dead already. But she's not in charge, and her men are under Rafe's dollar now, so she's forced into Avery's ship to try and stop Sam. Nate swims towards it as a large explosion rattles the cavern. Inside, he finds Sam unconscious, pinned under some wood, and Rafe lying in wait to exact some revenge because of their meddling. The cocky little rich boy is a bit too confident though, and Nadine disarms him and leaves the two men to settle their differences while she dips out. They fence as the fire slowly spreads around them, and even though Rafe is a better swordsman, his lack of awareness turns him into a pancake courtesy of the gold he spent his life looking for. The wood is too heavy for Nate to lift, but thinking on his feet, he blasts a hole in the floor to fill it with water to help make the beam light enough to move so they can swim out. The cavern begins to crumble over them, but they're able to get out of there before it traps them inside. While they part ways, Sam admits to Nate he still has the itch for adventure, which Nate knows all too well, so Sam and Sully discuss an upcoming job, while Nate heads back home to find out he's the new owner of a salvage company. Elena admits she also missed the adventure and thinks their aim to live a normal life was a bit misguided, so owning this company allows them to do the work legally. Roughly 15 years later, Nate and Elena are now parents, with their daughter Cassie fascinated with her parents' lives. While initially in trouble after digging through a locked cabinet, Nate is more excited than anything to tell his daughter about their adventures, but I'm willing to bet he left out the sheer amount of death he left in his wake. Surprisingly, he did ask Cassie to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to let YouTube know that you enjoy this content. And that's the last we see of Nathan Drake. There's one other Uncharted game that follows Chloe and Nadine, but it's entirely focused on them, so there's nothing else to add to this video. I'm sure we'll see him again when the Uncharted series resumes, but likely not as a main character. Perhaps he'll take on a Sully role as Cassie starts her life as a treasure hunter. Who knows? But what I do know is that Nate retired with a total of 2,808 kills. The majority of those were all human, with only 89 being supernatural. I don't count the Jinn from the third game since those were regular guys that Nate was hallucinating as supernatural. He also added somewhere between 200 to 250 spiders, but those will count separately. The second game had by far the most action, contributing 25% of the kills with a total of 700. Drake's Fortune came in second at 585, Uncharted 3 had 552, with Golden Abyss coming after at 512, and the last game as the only one under 500 with a total of 449. Only 10 kills were added from outside the games to round out Nate's final tally. I love these games, and this video was a blast to put together. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon with some spooky themed videos throughout October. Thanks as always for watching. I'm King Deschain, signing off for now.